For years, one man sat on death row doing the opposite of everyone else around him. He wasn't fighting to live. He was fighting to die. He told the courts he didn't want mercy. He didn't want appeals. He wanted it over. But just hours before the state granted his wish, he revealed something that forced investigators to reopen a case everyone had given up on. Because the man scheduled to die that night wasn't just taking secrets to the grave, he was leaving one behind. David Cox was never quiet about what he planned to do. While sitting in a Mississippi jail on serious charges, he told anyone who would listen that if he ever got out, he would kill his wife. Not in anger, not in frustration, he described it calmly, over and over, like he was rehearsing. Cellmates later said he talked about it for months. He named people. He explained the order. First her family, then her. These weren't empty threats or jailhouse bravado. They were promises. And somehow, after 9 months of warnings, the system still opened the door and let him walk free. What he did with that freedom would unfold before police, family members, and the entire state. The moment David Cox was released, he didn't hesitate. Within hours, he bought a handgun and extra ammunition. No celebration, no attempt to disappear. His next move was simple. He borrowed a vehicle, pointed it toward a small Mississippi town, and started driving. Inside that house, his wife believed she was finally safe. She had done everything the law asked of her. She had reported the abuse. She had a restraining order. She was staying with family. None of it mattered. Just after nightfall, Cox walked up to the front door and fired. The sound shattered the quiet street and sent people running for help. Someone escaped and called 911, but inside the house, the damage was already done. By the time police surrounded the property, David Cox was in control, and he made it clear he wasn't coming out. And the worst part was still ahead. For the next several hours, the house became a prison. Police surrounded it, negotiators tried every angle, and ambulances waited just out of reach. Inside, David Cox held total control, and he used it deliberately. He refused to let anyone help his wounded wife. When officers begged him to allow medical care, he made his intentions clear. He wanted time. He wanted witnesses. He wanted everyone to understand exactly what he was doing. Phone calls started going out. To family members. To anyone who would answer. He forced them to listen, turning their loved one's suffering into a weapon. Every minute that passed pushed help farther away. Negotiators realized they weren't dealing with someone seeking escape. This wasn't about getting out alive. This was about control, and making sure the damage lasted. And as the night dragged on, it became clear the situation wasn't ending the way anyone hoped. When it was finally over, there was no mystery about what had happened. David Cox didn't run. He didn't deny anything. He stood there calmly and admitted it. Later, in court, he took it even further, pleading guilty to every charge placed in front of him. There was no dramatic defense. No attempt to shift blame. Prosecutors didn't need to convince a jury he did it. His own words, recorded during that night, did the job for them. When the sentencing phase began, jurors heard hours of evidence detailing how long the suffering lasted and how deliberate it all was. By the time they reached a decision, it was unanimous. David Cox was sentenced to death. For most people on death row, that's when the fight begins. Appeals, delays, years of legal battles. But Cox had something very different in mind. And what he chose to do next stunned everyone involved. Death row didn't turn David Cox into a man begging for mercy. If anything, it did the opposite. As the years passed, he stopped cooperating with his own lawyers. Then he started filing motions himself, asking the courts to drop his appeals and move his execution forward. Judges were used to inmates fighting for every extra day of life. Cox was asking for the end. He wrote letters admitting guilt and making it clear he didn't want another chance. He told the court he understood exactly what would happen if his requests were granted, and that he was ready. The move raised alarms. Courts don't allow executions unless they're certain the inmate is thinking clearly. So they ordered evaluations, hearings, and testimony to decide one question. Did David Cox truly understand what he was asking for? The answer would decide whether he lived, or whether the state would finally do what he demanded. As the execution date closed in, David Cox did something no one expected. After more than a decade of silence, he admitted to another killing. A woman who had vanished years earlier. A case that had gone cold, with no body and no answers. This time, Cox didn't just confess. He provided details. A location, a hand-drawn map. He told investigators exactly where to dig, but only after he was gone. The timing wasn't accidental. Cox waived his legal protection so the confession wouldn't surface until after the state carried out his sentence. Whatever his motive was, control, guilt, or something darker, he made sure the truth came out on his terms. When the execution was over, prosecutors opened the envelope he left behind. And what they found sent investigators straight into rural Mississippi soil. Investigators followed the map to a quiet stretch of rural land that had been searched before, but never like this. This time, they brought everything. Ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, teams trained to find what didn't want to be found. It didn't take long. Beneath the soil, exactly where David Cox said it would be, they uncovered human remains. After years of waiting, the missing woman was finally found. For her family, it was the end of a question that had haunted them for more than a decade. They could finally stop wondering. Finally grieve. Finally lay her to rest. David Cox had taken almost everything with him when he died. But in the end, he left behind just enough truth to reopen old wounds, and close one final chapter. David Cox got the ending he wanted. He chose the moment. He chose the silence. And in the end, he even chose what truth would be revealed and when. But for the families he destroyed, there was no choice at all. 2 women lost their lives. Children were left to grow up carrying memories no one should have. Answers came, but peace didn't come with them. This case isn't just about punishment. It's about control, and how some people try to hold on to it until their very last breath. And the question it leaves behind is an uncomfortable one. When someone demands their own end, is that justice being served, or is it one final act of power?